I was standing in my driveway, admiring my newly installed storm door, when I saw Brenda Patterson marching across the street with that look on her face that every homeowner in Willow Creek Estates, Minnesota, had learned to dread. It was early September 2025, and I had just moved into this quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Minneapolis 3 months ago. The house was a beautiful two-story colonial that my wife Sarah and I had saved for years to purchase. Everything had been going smoothly until that Tuesday afternoon when Brenda, the HOA president, decided my storm door was apparently a crime against humanity. "Owen Northfield," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She was wearing a pink cardigan despite the warm weather, and her perfectly styled blonde hair did not move an inch in the breeze. "We need to talk about that door." I turned around, confused. "What about it?" "That color," she said, pointing at my storm door like it was radioactive waste. "It is completely unacceptable. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all exterior doors must be either white, beige, or forest green. That gray is not approved." I looked back at my storm door. It was a beautiful slate gray, modern and sleek, made by a company called Arctic Shield. I had spent considerable time researching storm doors because Minnesota winters were no joke, and I wanted something that could handle the brutal cold, the wind, and the heavy snow that would be coming in a few months. "Brenda, it's a storm door, it's functional. And honestly, it's a neutral gray. I don't see how this could possibly be an issue." Her face turned red. "It is an issue because I say it is an issue. The bylaws exist for a reason, Owen. They maintain our property values and keep this neighborhood looking pristine. That door needs to go, or you need to paint it white." "I'm not painting a perfectly good storm door that I just paid $1,200 to have installed," I said firmly. "And with all due respect, Brenda, I reviewed the HOA bylaws before I bought this house. The section you are referring to mentions primary exterior doors. This is a storm door, which is technically a secondary protective barrier. It's not the same thing." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Are you really going to split hairs with me about this? I'm just pointing out that I'm in compliance with the rules as written." "We'll see about that," she huffed. "You'll be receiving a formal violation notice in the mail within 3 business days. And if you don't remedy this situation within 30 days of that notice, you'll be fined $500 per day." She turned on her heel and marched back across the street to her own house, which was directly opposite mine. I watched her go, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I had heard stories about nightmare HOAs before moving in, but everyone I had talked to said Willow Creek Estates was relatively reasonable. Clearly, those people had never crossed Brenda Patterson. When Sarah got home from her nursing shift at Methodist Hospital that evening, I told her about the confrontation. She sighed and set her bag down on the kitchen counter. "I knew she was going to be a problem," Sarah said. "Remember at the neighborhood barbecue last month when she lectured Mrs. Chen about her garden gnome being 2 inches taller than the approved height? I thought she was joking about that." She was not joking. Mrs. Chen had to replace the gnome, cost her $40. I rubbed my temples. "This is insane. It's a storm door, a necessary storm door. Do you know what these winters are like up here? I grew up in Florida. I need all the insulation and protection I can get." "I know, honey. But maybe we should just paint it white and avoid the hassle." "No," I said, surprised by my own firmness. "I'm not painting it. I did my research. I followed the rules, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let some power-hungry HOA president bully me into destroying a perfectly good door just because she doesn't like the color." Sarah looked at me with a mixture of concern and pride. "Okay, but this might get ugly." She had no idea how right she was. The violation notice arrived exactly 3 days later, just as Brenda had promised. It was printed on official HOA letterhead and cited Section 7.3.2 of the bylaws regarding exterior paint colors. I read it carefully, then pulled out my own copy of the bylaws and read that section again. My interpretation was correct. The rule specifically mentioned primary exterior doors and trim. Storm doors were not mentioned anywhere in the document. I decided to respond formally. I drafted a letter explaining my position, cited the specific language in the bylaws, and even included photographs of my door along with the manufacturer's specifications showing it was designed specifically for extreme weather conditions. I sent it certified mail to the HOA management office. 2 weeks later, I received a response. The board had reviewed my appeal and denied it. According to their interpretation, all doors visible from the street fell under the exterior door policy, regardless of whether they were primary or secondary. They gave me 2 more weeks to comply before the fines would begin. I was furious. That evening, I did something I rarely did. I started researching Minnesota HOA law. I spent hours reading through statutes, legal precedents, and homeowner rights. What I discovered was fascinating. Minnesota law actually provided quite a bit of protection for homeowners against unreasonable HOA restrictions, especially when those restrictions were vaguely worded or arbitrarily enforced. I found a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, a sharp woman named Patricia Morgan who had a small practice in downtown Minneapolis. Her consultation fee was $200, which seemed worth it to avoid paying $500 a day in fines. "This is an interesting case," Patricia said during our meeting, reviewing the documents I had brought. "The bylaws are definitely vague here, and you're right that storm doors aren't explicitly mentioned. The question is whether you want to fight this in court, because that's probably where this is heading. How much would that cost? Depends on how far they want to take it. Could be anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000, maybe more if it really drags out." I felt sick. "For a door, for the principal," Patricia corrected. "HOAs like this, they bank on people backing down because legal fees are expensive. But here's the thing. If you can prove they're being arbitrary, or if you can show the bylaws are ambiguous, you might not only win, you might also be able to recover your legal fees from the HOA itself. What do you think my chances are? Honestly, maybe 60-40 in your favor. The ambiguity in the bylaws helps you, but judges can be unpredictable with these things. Some of them think HOAs are necessary for maintaining neighborhoods. Others think they're tyrannical." I left her office feeling conflicted. Sarah and I talked about it that night, weighing the options. In the end, we decided to hire Patricia and fight it. It wasn't really about the door anymore. It was about not being bullied. Patricia sent a letter to the HOA on my behalf, outlining our legal position and warning them that we would seek legal action if they pursued fines. The response was swift. Brenda herself called me, and she was livid. "You've got some nerve threatening legal action against this board," she said. "We're volunteers, Owen. We're just trying to keep this neighborhood nice." "Then enforce the rules fairly and clearly," I replied. "Your bylaws don't cover storm doors. If you want to add a provision about storm doors, call a meeting and vote on an amendment. But you can't just make up interpretations to suit your personal preferences." "This isn't personal," she snapped. "Isn't it? You're the one who came to my house within hours of the installation. You're the one who's pushing this issue when there are actual problems in this neighborhood that need attention." "What problems?" "The drainage issue on Maple Street that floods every time it rains. The broken streetlight on the corner that's been out for 2 months. The fact that half the community playground equipment is rusted and probably unsafe. But sure, Let's focus on my gray door. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Those issues are being addressed, Brenda finally said, her voice icy. Then address them before you harass homeowners over door colors. She hung up on me. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for October 15th. Patricia advised me to attend and make my case directly to the board. Sarah came with me for moral support. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. When we arrived, I was surprised to see how many people were there. Usually, these meetings drew maybe 10 people. Tonight, there were at least 40. Apparently, word had spread about my dispute with Brenda, and people were curious. Brenda called the meeting to order. She was flanked by the other board members: Dale Morrison, a retired accountant who served as treasurer; Linda Hayes, the secretary who always seemed nervous; and Tom Griffin, a large man who worked in construction and rarely spoke. After the usual preliminary business, Brenda addressed my issue. "We have a matter of non-compliance to discuss," she began. "Owen Northfield has installed a storm door in a non-approved color and has refused to remedy the violation despite multiple notices." "I'd like to speak," I said, standing up. Brenda looked annoyed but gestured for me to approach the front of the room. I walked up, feeling dozens of eyes on me. "I appreciate the opportunity to address the board," I began. "I want to be clear about something. I did not intentionally violate any HOA rules. Before I installed my storm door, I carefully reviewed the bylaws. The section regarding exterior doors specifically mentions primary exterior doors and trim. A storm door is a secondary protective barrier. It's not mentioned anywhere in the bylaws." "The spirit of the rule is clear," Brenda interrupted. "The spirit of the rule isn't enforceable," I countered. "The letter of the law is what matters. If the board wants to regulate storm doors, that's fine. Call for a vote to amend the bylaws. But you can't retroactively interpret vague language to suit your preferences." Dale, the treasurer, cleared his throat. "Owen makes a point. I've been on this board for 6 years, and we've never enforced door color rules on storm doors before. Mrs. Henderson on Oak Street has a bronze-colored storm door. The Johnsons have a black one." Brenda's face flushed. "Those are different." "How are they different?" I asked. "They just are," she snapped. "That's not a legal standard," Patricia said, standing up from where she was sitting in the audience. "I'm Patricia Morgan, Mr. Northfield's attorney. If this board chooses to pursue fines against my client, we will be filing suit in district court for arbitrary and capricious enforcement of HOA rules, and we will win." The room erupted in murmurs. Linda, the nervous secretary, leaned over and whispered something to Brenda. Tom Griffin looked uncomfortable. Dale was reading through a copy of the bylaws with a frown on his face. "We need to take a vote," Dale said finally. "I move that we table this issue until we can review the bylaws more carefully and determine whether storm doors are actually covered under the existing language." "I second that," Linda said quickly. Brenda looked furious, but she was outvoted. The motion passed 3-1, with only Brenda voting against it. As Sarah and I left the meeting, several neighbors approached me. Most of them were supportive. "Good for you for standing up to her," said an older man named George who lived 2 streets over. "Brenda's been running this HOA like her personal kingdom for too long." "I just want to live in peace," I said. "Don't we all?" George replied with a knowing smile. October turned into November, and Minnesota began its transformation into a frozen wasteland. The temperatures dropped rapidly, and the first significant snowfall came during the second week of November. It was just a preview of what was to come. I heard nothing from the HOA about my door. I assumed the issue had been dropped, especially since Dale had started asking questions about other storm doors in the neighborhood. It turned out there were at least 15 doors that weren't white, beige, or forest green. Enforcing the rule as Brenda wanted would have been a nightmare. Meanwhile, I was grateful every day for my Arctic Shield storm door. The temperature had dropped to the teens, and the wind chill made it feel even colder. My storm door created an insulated barrier that kept the frigid air from seeping around my main door. My heating bills were noticeably lower than my neighbors, and the house felt warmer. Brenda, I noticed, did not have a storm door. Her house had a single wooden front door, painted white, with a decorative wreath hanging on it. I thought about mentioning that a storm door might help with her heating costs, but I figured she wouldn't appreciate the advice. December arrived with a vengeance. The weather reports started warning about a major winter storm system moving down from Canada. The meteorologists were calling it a potential blizzard, with forecasts of over 2 feet of snow, wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour, and wind chills approaching 40 below zero. Sarah and I prepared like we were preparing for a siege. We stocked up on food, batteries, flashlights, and made sure we had plenty of firewood for our fireplace in case the power went out. I checked the weather stripping on all our doors and windows. The Arctic Shield storm door was locked tight, and I could see the quality of its construction in every detail. The storm hit on December 18th, a Friday evening. It started with light snow around 6 in the evening, but by 8 o'clock, it was a full whiteout. The wind howled like something alive, and the snow came down so thick I couldn't see across the street to Brenda's house. Sarah and I stayed inside, watching movies and keeping the fireplace going. The power flickered a few times but stayed on. Outside, the storm raged with an intensity I had never experienced. This was my first real Minnesota blizzard, and it was terrifying and awe-inspiring at the same time. Around midnight, I heard a loud crack from somewhere outside. Sarah and I both jumped. "What was that?" she asked. "I don't know." "Probably a tree branch breaking from the weight of the snow." We went to bed but slept fitfully, the sound of the wind constantly waking us up. By morning, the storm had not let up. If anything, it had gotten worse. I looked out our bedroom window and could barely see the ground through the swirling snow. "This is insane," I said. "The Weather Service issued a warning saying don't go outside unless it's an absolute emergency," Sarah said, checking her phone. "They're saying this could last until tomorrow night." We spent Saturday inside, watching the snow accumulate to extraordinary heights. Our driveway disappeared. Our cars became white mounds. The street was invisible under a blanket of white. Sunday morning, the storm finally broke. The wind died down, the snow stopped falling, and an eerie quiet settled over everything. The sun came out, blindingly bright, reflecting off the fresh snow. I opened our front door and then the storm door to look outside. The snow was nearly 3 feet deep in most places. Drifts against houses and cars were even higher. It was beautiful and daunting at the same time. I was about to close the door when I heard someone shouting. "Help! Somebody help!" I recognized the voice. It was Brenda. I quickly pulled on my boots, coat, and gloves and waded through the snow toward her house. It was exhausting work. The snow was deep and heavy, and I was breathing hard by the time I reached her front yard. Brenda was standing in her doorway, and I could immediately see the problem. Her front door was partially off its hinges. The wood around the frame was splintered and cracked. The door itself was warped and damaged. "What happened?" I called out. "The wind," she said, and I was shocked to hear her voice trembling. "The pressure from the storm, it broke. I've been freezing all night. My heat can't keep up with all the cold air coming in." I waded closer and examined the damage. It was bad. The door frame was seriously compromised, and her wooden door had taken a beating from the extreme temperature changes and wind pressure. Without a storm door to protect it, the main door had borne the full brunt of the blizzard. "You need to get this fixed immediately," I said. "Do you have plastic sheeting or something to cover it temporarily?" "I have some in the garage," she said. "But I can't get to the garage. The side door is frozen shut." I spent the next hour helping Brenda. I managed to get her garage door open, found plastic sheeting, and helped her tape it over the damaged door frame to at least block some of the cold air. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was better than nothing. "Thank you," she said quietly when we were done. She looked exhausted and cold. "I know we haven't exactly been friendly." "It's fine," I said. "Nobody should have to freeze. You need to call a contractor as soon as possible. This isn't something you can leave for long." She nodded. "I will." I trudged back to my house where Sarah had hot coffee waiting for me. "Is she okay?" Sarah asked. "Her door is destroyed. The storm just ripped it apart." "That's terrible. How's our door?" I went to check. The Arctic Shield storm door was perfect. Not a crack, not a warp, not even a scratch. It had held firm through the entire blizzard, protecting our main door and keeping the brutal wind and cold at bay. The next few days were spent digging out from the storm. The city sent plows through eventually, but everyone had to clear their own driveways. I spent hours with a snowblower, and my back ached for days afterward. Brenda, I learned from neighborhood gossip, was having trouble finding a contractor. Everyone was booked solid because the storm had damaged dozens of homes across the area. Doors, windows, roofs, all had taken a beating. She was still living with plastic sheeting over her front entrance, and her heating bills had to be astronomical. A week after the storm, just before Christmas, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Brenda standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Hi, Owen," she said. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure," I said, curious. She stepped inside, and I noticed her glancing at my storm door as she entered. "I wanted to apologize," she said once we were in the living room. "About the door situation, I was wrong. I was being petty and controlling, and I see that now." I was surprised. "Okay, thank you for saying that. I also wanted to ask you something." She paused, looking almost embarrassed. "Where did you get your storm door, the company that made it?" "I've been looking online, and I can't seem to find anything that looks as sturdy as yours." I had to fight to keep from smiling. "It's made by a company called Arctic Shield. They specialize in extreme weather doors. I bought it through a local installer called Premium Entry Systems." "Arctic Shield," she repeated, pulling out her phone to make a note. "And it held up okay during the storm." "Perfectly. Didn't have a single issue." She nodded slowly. "Mine obviously didn't make it, and now I'm looking at a $5,000 repair for the door and the frame. The insurance might cover some of it, but it's still a mess. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. It's my own fault. If I had installed a good storm door years ago, this probably wouldn't have happened." The contractor I finally got to come look at it said the main door took too much direct exposure to the wind and temperature changes. It just couldn't handle it. There was an awkward silence. "I'm going to call a board meeting after the holidays," Brenda said finally. "I'm going to recommend we amend the bylaws to specifically allow storm doors in any color as long as they meet certain quality standards. I think I can get the votes." "That seems reasonable," I said carefully, "and I'm sorry. Really. I let power go to my head, and I made your life difficult for no good reason." After she left, Sarah came downstairs from where she'd been listening from the hallway. "Did that really just happen?" she asked. "I think Brenda Patterson just apologized to me and asked for your help." "That too." The holidays came and went. January arrived with more snow and bitter cold, but nothing as dramatic as the December blizzard. Brenda got her door repaired and, true to her word, also had a high-quality storm door installed. She went with Arctic Shield, though she chose white to match her house. The HOA meeting in mid-January was surprisingly pleasant. Brenda proposed an amendment to the bylaws that would allow storm doors and other weather protection features in any color, provided they met certain structural and quality standards. The measure passed unanimously. "I want to thank Owen Northfield for standing his ground on this issue," Brenda said during the meeting, and I nearly fell out of my chair. "He was right, and I was wrong. This amendment will make our homes safer and more energy efficient, which benefits everyone." After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. Apparently, many of them had wanted to install storm doors but had been afraid of running afoul of the HOA rules. "You did us all a favor," George said, clapping me on the shoulder. Brenda needed someone to stand up to her. As winter continued, I noticed something interesting. More and more houses in Willow Creek Estates were getting storm doors installed. Some were white, some were black, some were bronze or gray. But all of them were quality doors designed to handle Minnesota's brutal winters. In early February, I was outside clearing snow from my driveway when Brenda came over. She looked almost friendly. "I wanted to show you something," she said, pulling out her phone. "My heating bill from December before I got the storm door." She showed me the screen. It was nearly $400. And here's January after the storm door was installed. The new bill was $230. "That's a significant savings," I said. "I'm actually going to mention this at the next HOA meeting. I think we should send out information to all the residents about the benefits of storm doors. It might help people make informed decisions." "That's a good idea," she smiled, and it seemed genuine. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about how I've been running this board. I think I lost sight of what an HOA is supposed to do. We're supposed to help the community, not control it. Everyone makes mistakes. Some bigger than others," she said wryly. "Anyway, I wanted you to know that I've learned from this. And I appreciate that you didn't back down even when I was being unreasonable." Over the next few weeks, something shifted in the neighborhood. The HOA meetings became less about petty enforcement and more about actual community improvement. The drainage issue on Maple Street was finally fixed. The broken streetlight was replaced. A committee was formed to evaluate and upgrade the playground equipment. Brenda even started soliciting input from residents about what they wanted to see in the neighborhood. It turned out people had a lot of ideas, and most of them were good. In March, as the snow finally began to melt and spring started to peek through, I received a letter from the HOA. For a moment, my heart sank, worried it was another violation notice. But when I opened it, I found something completely different. It was a formal letter of apology from the board, signed by all 4 members, acknowledging that they had mishandled my storm door situation and thanking me for bringing the bylaw ambiguity to their attention. They also included a check for $200, reimbursing me for my consultation fee with Patricia. "That's classy," Sarah said when I showed her the letter. "I never thought I'd see the day." "People can change," I said. "Even HOA presidents." That spring and summer, Willow Creek Estates became a genuinely pleasant place to live. The community events were better attended. People seemed happier. And Brenda, while still detail-oriented and organized, was no longer the tyrant she had been. I ran into her at the neighborhood 4th of July barbecue, and we actually had a nice conversation about gardening. She mentioned she was thinking about not running for HOA president again when her term ended in the fall. "I think it might be good for the community to have some fresh perspective," she said. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I think I got too entrenched in my ways. You've made good changes lately, I offered. Only because someone finally called me on my nonsense, she replied with a laugh. That storm door thing was a wake-up call, literally and figuratively. September came around again, marking a full year since my storm door controversy had begun. The neighborhood held elections for the HOA board. Brenda chose not to run for president, though she did stay on as a regular board member. Dale Morrison was elected as the new president, and he immediately set a more collaborative tone. At the first board meeting under Dale's leadership, he proposed forming several committees to handle different aspects of neighborhood management. One would handle architectural reviews, another would handle community events, another would handle maintenance and repairs. The goal was to distribute the power and decision-making rather than concentrating it in one person. We've learned that too much authority in too few hands leads to problems, Dale said. This way, we get more input and better decisions. The motion passed unanimously. As fall turned to winter again, I found myself actually looking forward to the snow. My Arctic Shield storm door had proven itself, and I knew my home was ready for whatever weather Minnesota could throw at it. And this year, I wasn't the only one. The neighborhood was full of storm doors now, in various colors, all chosen by homeowners who were free to make their own decisions about protecting their homes. In late October, the Weather Service started warning about another potentially serious winter storm. This time, nobody in Willow Creek Estates was unprepared. People checked their storm doors, their weather stripping, their emergency supplies. The community email list was full of neighbors sharing tips and offers to help each other if needed. When the storm hit in early November, it was significant but not as dramatic as the previous December's blizzard. Still, it was serious enough. 2 feet of snow, high winds, bitter cold. But this time, every door in the neighborhood held firm. No emergency repairs were needed. No one was left freezing because their door had failed. The morning after the storm, as I was outside beginning the process of digging out my driveway, I saw Brenda doing the same across the street. She waved at me and I waved back. Her storm door, I noticed, looked perfect. Not a crack, not a warp. George walked by, clearing the sidewalk in front of his house with a snowblower. "Beautiful morning," he shouted over the noise of the machine. "If you say so," I shouted back, laughing. Better than last year, he was right. It was better than last year. Not because the storm was less severe, but because the community was better prepared and better managed. That evening, Sarah and I sat by the fireplace, warm and comfortable despite the cold outside. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said. "If Brenda hadn't made such a big deal about your door color, a lot of people in this neighborhood would probably still be dealing with damaged doors and high heating bills." Unintended consequences, I agreed. Sometimes the worst conflicts lead to the best outcomes. I thought about that. My conflict with Brenda over a gray storm door had seemed like such a nightmare at the time. The stress, the legal fees, the confrontations, all of it had been exhausting and frustrating. But it had led to real change, not just in the HOA bylaws, but in how the entire community was managed. The December holidays were festive in Willow Creek Estates that year. The HOA organized a neighborhood light display contest, but it was friendly and fun rather than rigid and judgmental. Brenda's house won 3rd place, and she was genuinely delighted rather than upset about not winning first. On Christmas Eve, several neighbors gathered at George's house for an impromptu party. Brenda was there, Dale was there, and about 20 other people from the neighborhood. We shared food, stories, and laughter. At one point, Someone made a joke about my infamous storm door and everyone laughed, including Brenda. "The door that changed everything," someone said. "The door that survived a blizzard and defeated an HOA," someone else added. "The door that taught us all a lesson about choosing our battles," Brenda said, raising her glass. "To Owen's door, to Owen's door," everyone echoed. It was ridiculous and wonderful at the same time. As we drove home that night, the streets quiet and peaceful under a blanket of fresh snow, I felt genuinely grateful. Grateful for my home, for my neighborhood, for the community we had built. Even grateful, in a strange way, for the conflict that had made it all possible. "Are you happy we stayed and fought?" Sarah asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "It was worth it." We got out of the car and walked to our front door. The porch light illuminated my Arctic Shield storm door in all its slate gray glory. It looked beautiful, functional, and defiant. A monument to the principle that sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it seems like a small thing. I unlocked the storm door, then the main door, and we stepped into our warm home. Behind us, the storm door clicked shut with a solid, reassuring sound. It had protected us through blizzards and controversies, through winter storms and neighborhood drama, and it would continue to do so for years to come. The next morning, I woke up to find several inches of fresh snow had fallen overnight. As I was getting ready to go outside and clear the driveway, I saw Brenda already out with her snowblower, working on her own driveway. When she finished, instead of going inside, she moved over to Mrs. Chen's driveway and started clearing that too. I grabbed my own snowblower and joined her. Together, we worked our way down the street, helping the elderly residents and anyone who might struggle with the heavy snow. Other neighbors saw what we were doing and joined in. Within a couple of hours, most of the driveways in our section of Willow Creek Estates were clear. "This is what a community should be," Dale said as we all gathered afterward, tired but satisfied. "It is," I agreed. That winter passed with a few more snowstorms, but nothing as dramatic as the previous year's blizzard. Each time, the neighborhood came together to help each other out. The HOA, under Dale's leadership, sent out helpful reminders about winter preparation but never demands or threats. The tone had completely changed. In March, as winter finally began to release its grip on Minnesota, the HOA held its annual budget meeting. Dale presented the financial report, and I was surprised to see that, despite the more relaxed enforcement, the neighborhood was actually in better financial shape than the previous year. When people feel like they are part of a community rather than subjects of an authority, they're more willing to contribute and participate, Dale explained. "Voluntary compliance is always better than forced compliance." Brenda nodded in agreement. "I wish I had understood that years ago. Would have saved everyone a lot of stress." The meeting ended with a discussion about future projects for the neighborhood. Someone proposed installing better street lighting. Someone else suggested creating a community garden. A young couple who had just moved in proposed organizing a neighborhood watch program. Every idea was received positively and considered seriously. As Sarah and I walked home after the meeting, she squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you fought for that door," she said. "Me too. Not just because it was the right thing to do, but because it made this whole place better." She was right. The storm door controversy had been a catalyst for change. It had exposed problems in how the HOA was being run and forced everyone, including Brenda, to reconsider their approach. What had started as a petty conflict over a color choice had evolved into a complete transformation of community governance. April brought rain and the slow emergence of spring. Grass began to appear from under the melting snow. Trees started to bud. The neighborhood came alive with color and activity after the long, white winter. I was in my front yard one Saturday afternoon, starting to plan my spring landscaping, when a moving truck pulled up to a house 3 doors down. A new family was moving in. I walked over to introduce myself, remembering how welcoming most of the neighbors had been when Sarah and I had moved in. The new homeowners were a young couple named Marcus and Jennifer with a toddler daughter. They seemed a bit overwhelmed by the moving process, so I offered to help. Several other neighbors saw what was happening and came over to assist as well. Within an hour, we had a whole crew helping unload the truck. "This is amazing," Marcus said. "We didn't expect this kind of welcome." "Willow Creek Estates is a good community," I told him. "We look out for each other." Brenda showed up with a basket of homemade muffins and a folder of information about the neighborhood. The old Brenda would have shown up with a list of rules and regulations. This Brenda was offering help and hospitality. "If you have any questions about the HOA or anything else, feel free to ask anyone here," she told Marcus and Jennifer. "We're here to help, not to hassle you." After the moving truck was empty and had driven away, several of us stood in Marcus and Jennifer's driveway, chatting and getting to know the new neighbors. "We were worried about the HOA," Jennifer admitted. "We've heard horror stories about HOAs from friends, but you all seem really nice." "We had some growing pains," Dale said diplomatically, "but we've figured out how to work together now." "Speaking of which," Marcus said, "we're thinking about installing a storm door before next winter. Are there any restrictions on those?" Everyone laughed and Marcus looked confused. "There's a story there," I said. "I'll tell you about it sometime. But the short answer is no, install whatever storm door you want. I can even give you a recommendation. Mine performed incredibly well during last year's blizzard." "That would be great," Marcus said. Over the next few weeks, I helped Marcus research storm doors and connected him with Premium Entry Systems, the company that had installed mine. He ended up getting an Arctic Shield door in black, which looked sharp against his brick exterior. "Thanks for the recommendation," he told me after it was installed. "This thing is built like a tank. You'll appreciate it come December," I assured him. Summer arrived and Willow Creek Estates was beautiful. The community garden that had been proposed in March was planted and thriving. The neighborhood watch program was up and running. The new street lighting had been installed, making evening walks safer and more pleasant. The 4th of July barbecue that year was the biggest and best yet. Someone had rented a bouncy house for the kids. There was a dunk tank, and Dale volunteered to be the first person in it. Brenda organized a pie baking contest that turned out to be hilariously competitive. As the sun set and fireworks began in the distance, I stood with Sarah, watching our neighbors laughing and celebrating together. "This is what you fought for," Sarah said softly. "Not just the door, this." I understood what she meant. By refusing to back down over something that seemed small, by insisting that rules be clear and fairly enforced, by standing up to arbitrary authority, I had inadvertently helped create space for the community to become what it was always meant to be. "It was worth every bit of stress," I said. The summer passed with various community events and activities. I got to know more of my neighbors and found that most of them were genuinely good people. The few who were difficult or cranky were manageable because the community had learned how to handle conflicts constructively rather than letting them escalate. In August, I was surprised to receive a phone call from a reporter at the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Somehow, she had heard about my storm door controversy with the HOA and wanted to do a story about it. "We're doing a series on HOAs and homeowner rights," she explained. "Your case is interesting because it had a positive outcome. Most of the stories we hear are nightmares." I was hesitant at first, but Sarah convinced me to do it. It might help other people who are dealing with unreasonable HOAs, she said. Your story shows that standing up for yourself can actually work. The reporter, whose name was Amanda Chen, came to our house for an interview. She photographed my storm door, interviewed me about the whole saga, and even interviewed Brenda about how the situation had changed her approach to HOA management. The article ran in early September, almost exactly 2 years after my storm door had been installed. It was titled, "The Storm Door That Changed a Neighborhood: How One Homeowner's Stand Against His HOA Led to Community Reform." The article was balanced and well-written, highlighting both the initial conflict and the positive changes that had resulted. It quoted me, Brenda, Dale, and several other neighbors. It even included before and after photos of Brenda's front entrance, showing the damage from the blizzard and then her new protected door. After the article ran, I received emails and messages from people all over the Twin Cities area dealing with their own HOA issues. Some wanted advice, others just wanted to share their stories. I did my best to offer helpful guidance, mostly recommending they consult with attorneys like Patricia Morgan, who specialized in HOA law. One email particularly stood out. It was from a woman in a suburb of St. Paul who was being fined by her HOA for installing solar panels on her roof. She said my story had inspired her to fight back rather than just pay the fines and remove the panels. Minnesota law actually protected homeowners' rights to install solar panels, but her HOA was ignoring that law. With the right legal help, she thought she could win. Your story reminded me that HOAs aren't above the law, she wrote. Thank you for sharing it. I showed the email to Sarah. I never thought my door would inspire people. It's not about the door, she said. It's about standing up for what's right. That always inspires people. Fall arrived again, bringing the brilliant colors that made Minnesota autumns famous. The leaves turned gold and red and orange. The air became crisp and cool. And slowly, inevitably, winter began to approach. In October, Dale sent out an email to the neighborhood reminding everyone to prepare for winter. It included tips on winterizing homes, checking heating systems, and ensuring storm doors and windows were in good condition. It was helpful rather than demanding, informative rather than threatening. The first snow came in early November, just a dusting that melted by afternoon. But it was a reminder that serious winter weather was coming. I checked my storm door, making sure all the weather stripping was still tight and the hardware was functioning properly. Everything was perfect. After 2 winters, the door showed no signs of wear or weakness. Thanksgiving came, and several neighbors organized a community potluck dinner for anyone who didn't have family nearby. It was held in the community center, and over 50 people attended. The amount of food was overwhelming, and the sense of fellowship was heartwarming. Marcus and Jennifer, who were from Texas originally, seemed particularly grateful for the community. "This is our first Thanksgiving away from our families," Jennifer said, "but this makes it feel less lonely." "That's what neighbors are for," Brenda said, and she meant it. December arrived with forecasts of another significant winter storm. The meteorologists were predicting heavy snow and high winds, though hopefully not as severe as the blizzard 2 years earlier. The neighborhood prepared calmly and efficiently. Everyone knew what to do now. The storm hit on December 10th, a Friday evening. Snow began falling around dinner time and continued through the night and into Saturday morning. By the time it ended Saturday afternoon, we had accumulated about 18 inches of snow with wind gusts that created impressive drifts. But this time, there were no emergencies, no damaged doors, no frantic calls for help. Every house in Willow Creek Estates stood firm against the storm. The Arctic Shield doors and other quality storm doors throughout the neighborhood did exactly what they were designed to do. Sunday morning, after the storm had passed, I went outside to start clearing snow. All up and down the street, neighbors were doing the same. We worked together, helping each other, clearing not just our own properties but common areas and sidewalks. Brenda came over as I was finishing my driveway. "Your door looks good," she said, gesturing at my storm door. "So does yours," I replied. She smiled. "You know, I've been thinking. In a weird way, I'm grateful for our conflict 2 years ago. It taught me some important lessons." "Like what?" "Like the difference between leadership and control. Like how to listen instead of just dictate. Like how being flexible and reasonable is actually stronger than being rigid and authoritarian. Those are good lessons. They are. And I never would have learned them if you hadn't stood up to me. So thank you." "You're welcome. And thank you for being willing to learn and change." Not everyone would have done that. We stood there for a moment in the cold, bright morning, the neighborhood peaceful and beautiful under its blanket of snow. "Merry Christmas, Owen," Brenda said. "Merry Christmas, Brenda." As she walked back to her house, I thought about the journey we'd all been on. A simple storm door, chosen for practical reasons, had become the catalyst for community transformation. What had started as a conflict had ended as a lesson in governance, flexibility, and the importance of standing up for reasonable principles. The rest of December passed peacefully. Christmas in Willow Creek Estates was festive and warm, despite the cold outside. The neighborhood light display was spectacular. On Christmas Eve, someone organized caroling, and a group of about 30 people walked through the streets, singing at each house. It was corny and old-fashioned and absolutely perfect. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on how different things were from 2 years earlier. I had moved to this neighborhood as a stranger, unsure of what to expect. I had faced an unreasonable HOA president and chosen to fight rather than submit. That fight had been stressful and expensive and difficult, but it had also been necessary and ultimately transformative. New Year's Eve, Sarah and I hosted a small party for some of our closest neighbors. George was there, and Dale and his wife, and Marcus and Jennifer, and even Brenda. We stayed up until midnight, toasting the new year and reflecting on the old one. "To another year in the best neighborhood in Minnesota," Dale said, raising his glass. "To neighbors who look out for each other," George added. "To storm doors that survive blizzards," Marcus said with a grin, and everyone laughed. "To second chances and new beginnings," Brenda said quietly, and everyone raised their glasses to that. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Brenda pulled me aside. "I know I've said this before, but I want to say it again. Thank you for not backing down. Thank you for being stubborn enough to fight for what was right. This neighborhood is better because of it. I'm better because of it. We're all just figuring this out as we go," I said. "Some of us take longer to figure it out than others," she replied with a self-deprecating smile. After everyone had left and Sarah and I were cleaning up, she asked me if I had any regrets about the whole storm door saga. "None," I said without hesitation. "It was hard, but it was worth it. We got to keep our door, the bylaws got fixed, the community got better, and we made real friends with our neighbors. I'd do it all again exactly the same way. Even the stressful parts. Even the stressful parts. Sometimes standing up for yourself is stressful. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing." The new year brought more snow, more cold, but also the promise of spring eventually returning. Life in Willow Creek Estates continued with its rhythm of community events, board meetings, and neighborhood cooperation. The HOA under Dale's leadership remained reasonable and helpful. focused on genuine community improvement rather than petty enforcement. In March, as winter finally began to loosen its grip once again, I was outside one Saturday afternoon, enjoying the slightly warmer weather and beginning to think about spring planting. A car pulled up in front of my house, and a woman I didn't recognize got out. "Excuse me," she said, approaching. "Are you Owen Northfield?" "I am. I read the article about you in the Star Tribune. I'm dealing with a similar situation with my HOA in Bloomington. They're trying to fine me for installing a different type of mailbox than what's specified in the bylaws, even though the bylaws are 10 years old and the style they specify isn't even manufactured anymore. I was wondering if you could tell me more about how you handled your situation." I invited her in, and over coffee, I shared my experience and advice. I gave her Patricia Morgan's contact information and encouraged her to stand her ground if she believed she was in the right. "The most important thing," I told her, "is to document everything and understand your rights under state law. HOAs have power, but they don't have unlimited power, and they're subject to the same legal principles as any other organization. They have to follow their own rules, and those rules have to be reasonable." She thanked me profusely and left with renewed determination to fight her case. After she was gone, Sarah looked at me with amusement. "You've become the local HOA resistance hero," she said. "That's a weird legacy." "It's a good legacy. You're helping people stand up for themselves." Over the following months, I heard from several more people dealing with HOA issues. Some sought advice, others just wanted to share their stories. I helped where I could, mostly by sharing what I had learned and connecting people with good legal resources. In May, I received an invitation from a local homeowners' rights advocacy group to speak at one of their meetings about my experience. I was nervous about public speaking, but Sarah convinced me to do it. The meeting was held at a library in Minneapolis. About 40 people attended, most of them dealing with various HOA disputes. I told my story from beginning to end, emphasizing the importance of understanding the bylaws, seeking legal advice when necessary, and standing firm when you're in the right. During the question and answer session afterward, someone asked me what I thought was the biggest problem with HOAs in general. "I think the biggest problem is when HOAs forget they exist to serve the community, not control it," I said. "An HOA should be about maintaining property values, organizing community activities, and handling shared maintenance responsibilities. It should not be about one person or a small group of people imposing their personal preferences on everyone else. The moment an HOA becomes about control rather than service, it becomes a problem." The response was enthusiastic. Many people thanked me afterward, saying my story had given them hope and courage to fight their own battles. As summer arrived once again in Minnesota, bringing warm weather and long daylight hours, life in Willow Creek Estates was peaceful and happy. The community garden was thriving. The playground equipment that had been upgraded was constantly filled with children. The Neighborhood Watch program had successfully reduced the minor property crimes that occasionally plagued suburban areas. One evening in late June, as Sarah and I were sitting on our front porch enjoying the sunset, Brenda walked over. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "I'm moving. My husband got a job opportunity in Arizona and we're going to take it." "Wow, that's a big change," I said. "How do you feel about it?" "Mixed, honestly. I'll miss this place, but I'm also looking forward to a fresh start and warmer winters," she added with a laugh. "We'll miss you," Sarah said, and she meant it. The Brenda who was moving away was completely different from the Brenda who had marched across the street 2.5 years ago to complain about my door. "I'll miss you too, both of you and this neighborhood." She paused. I'm grateful for the time I've had here and the lessons I've learned. I'm going to approach my new community differently. I think I might volunteer for the HOA there, but this time I'll do it right. I'm sure you will, I said. Brenda moved at the end of July. The neighborhood threw her a farewell party, and she seemed genuinely touched by the outpouring of affection. Despite her rocky start and the conflicts she had created, she had earned the respect and friendship of the community through her willingness to change and grow. A young family with 3 kids moved into Brenda's house in August. They were thrilled with the storm door. The previous owner said it was essential for Minnesota winters, the wife told me. She said you'd recommended the company that made it. I did. You'll be glad you have it when December comes around. And so life continued in Willow Creek Estates. The seasons turned, neighbors came and went, children grew, gardens bloomed and went dormant and bloomed again. My Arctic Shield storm door remained a quiet sentinel, protecting my home through every storm and season. But more than that, it remained a reminder. A reminder that standing up for what's right matters, even when the issue seems small. A reminder that communities work best when they're based on cooperation, rather than control. A reminder that people can change and grow when they're willing to learn from their mistakes. 3 years after that first confrontation with Brenda over my gray door, I stood in my driveway on a crisp September morning, preparing to head to work. The door still looked perfect, still functioned flawlessly, still protected my home exactly as it was designed to do. A new neighbor was moving in 2 houses down. I made a mental note to go introduce myself after work and offer help if they needed it. That's what we did in Willow Creek Estates now. We helped each other. We looked out for each other. We worked together to make our community better. All because of a storm door that refused to comply with an unreasonable interpretation of vague bylaws. All because one homeowner decided to stand his ground. All because a community learned that flexibility and reasonableness are strengths, not weaknesses. I climbed into my car and backed out of the driveway, glancing one more time at my storm door as I left. It gleamed in the morning sun, gray and solid and true. The door that survived a blizzard and changed a neighborhood. The door that taught us all that sometimes the smallest battles lead to the biggest victories. And I drove off to work, content in the knowledge that I lived in a place where people looked out for each other, where the rules made sense, and where a man could choose his own storm door color without fear of unreasonable fines or petty tyrants. It was a good place to call home.